Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine, Taylor-Klaus, and Diane, Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults.
Hi everyone, Elaine and Diane here, and we know that you want your complex kids to grow up to be happy and independent, and yet you're not always sure how or when to help with that.
In this podcast, we'll encourage you to collaborate with all kinds of complex kids and support them in navigating life and learning.
And we'll interview leading experts from around the world, as well as parents in our own community, talking about how training for parents actually helps these complex kids.
We'll talk about the issues we hear parents struggling with all the time and how a coach approach can support and empower your amazing young people.
We won't tell you what to do. We're going to help you figure out how. So let's move on to the next conversation. Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. We are thrilled to have you here and to welcome the one and only Dr. Russell Ramsay here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
A few years in coming. I am so excited to be in this conversation with you today.
Very much. We've been in each other's orbit and we're finally colliding.
Yeah, it's taken a little while. You know, there's a lot happening in this world that we're in.
Definitely.
And we do encourage everybody to read more about Dr. Ramsay in the show notes. All that information is there. He is not going to be a stranger's name to many of you because he's been in this arena for many years, belying young years, of course, not that many years. But so why don't you get us started?
It's not the years, it's the mileage.
So. There you go. Beautiful.
Maybe talk a little bit about how you ended up doing what you're doing. What's the backstory for our audience to get started?
Yeah.
Tell you what, psychology ended up being something. I took a Psychology 102 course in undergrad at the University of Miami, and who made the Final Four in the NCAA, and both
congratulations,
men's and women's. But it just seemed like really fascinating, and it seemed like it'd be interesting for a long time, and it has been. The ADHD side of things was a total accident and fortuitous. I did not go to Penn as a postdoc looking to do ADHD. My friend, colleague, and frequent co-author, Dr. Tony Rothstein, a very noted child psychiatrist in the Philadelphia area, and also became a specialist in adult psychiatry, had the idea around the time of Driven to Distraction about maybe starting an adult program. And he had started the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia's highly regarded child ADHD program.
Right.
And I just happened to be a young psychologist at the time. And my line for the two of us is everything interests both of us and we can't say no to work. So I shrugged my shoulders and said, sure, I think maybe we can modify CBT for adult ADHD. And that's how I got into it. And here I am. We just had our 24th anniversary of that first meeting. So the Penn ADHD program is in its 25th year.
That's amazing.
It is.
That's truly amazing. And I had the honor of giving the Lifetime Achievement Award to Tony many years ago.
My line about Tony, there are those who know Tony and those who are about to know Tony.
Yeah, it's very, very true.
Very vivid personality. Yeah. And wonderful.
So specifically, what you just said, I want to highlight because I suspect it perked a lot of ears. It was about adapting CBT for ADHD.
Right.
Talk a little bit more about what that means.
Cognitive behavioral therapy is a form people say, how is it different than talk therapy? It is a talk therapy. The two things it emphasized, one was by Dr. Aaron Beck at Penn, the role of thoughts in influencing behavior, emotion, and everything else. Another thing that is underappreciated that Dr. Beck brought to the table was the ability of individuals to track and change their own thoughts, making the therapist obsolete, as opposed to, and I say this with all respect, and it's more complex than this, but the expert psychoanalyst or the expert behavioral therapist who knows the reinforcement schedule and the functional analysis, and that's overly simplistic to make the point here. So hopefully my friends and colleagues will grant me something here. But when it came to adapting ADHD, and there were multiple groups like Mary Solanto, Steve Safran, Alexander Phillips, and Susan Young in the UK, our group, you don't think yourself into having ADHD, but it was a focus on the implementation of the coping strategies for a group that historically has difficulties. It's not a knowledge problem, it's a performance problem, ADHD. I know what I need to do, but I just don't do it when I need to do it. However, over the last
highlight marker for those listening, right? If you want to know what does ADHD look like in a nutshell, I know what it is I'm supposed to do, and I can't get myself to do what I'm expected to do.
Right. When I need to do it.
Right.
But we are finding that, even if it doesn't cause ADHD, and even Dr. Beck later on said that was like one of the misunderstandings about ADHD, that it says thoughts cause everything, even though early writings are pretty close to that. But we now know living with ADHD, and apropos of the work you and Diane are doing, parenting with ADHD, the experience of living with ADHD, parenting ADHD, however we want to frame this, there's going to be a history there that can prompt somebody to think a certain way and probably have some frustrating experiences that lead people to doubt themselves, doubt whether certain skills will work, think themselves out of certain situations, be maybe more pessimistic about things, a whole host of things. So even though it may not cause ADHD, I call it a crucial ligament between intention and action.
Well, so what you're saying is that, I'm sorry, that it's almost that it's not about the thoughts can change your ADHD. It's more that the thoughts might inhibit your ability to be able to focus on what's going on. And because the shame, the guilt, everything else that kind of falls underneath it.
Focusing on what's going on. And also, especially as adults, maybe being able to adapt and personalize a lot of the skills to how you work and how you work best. And maybe there were some things that were encouraged or instructed in school. I mean, I'll tell my clients, if we're talking about your procrastination and all I bring to the table is telling you to start earlier, sue me for malpractice, please.
Right,
please.
You know that, but it's like my phrase that I use, like when people say, well, I know what I need to do. What good is just talking about it going to be? I say, I think we're pretty good at reverse engineering how you procrastinate, not just start earlier. It's how do you think yourself out? What role do the emotions, the ugh feelings about what you have to do, or the history with, say, a writing assignment or even a writing task or something like, around the time that we're talking, doing taxes, and, what's the history with using a planner and some of the frustrations that make perfect sense, why you might be skeptical or have some negative predictions, but can we rework that, have some novel, new experience, new learning experiences where you change your relationship with the coping strategies with yourself, with your emotions, and let's just see if we can nudge things in a direction that you want them to go in. And I would imagine this is apropos of parenting, what can, with all respect, be, I think, very complex parenting situations.
Yeah, indeed. And there are kind of two directions I'd like to go with what I've just heard you say. So the term you use is the ligament between intention and action. Really poignant term, because I think there's a lot of work in the ADHD space around the action. And we, from the coaching realm, put a lot of emphasis on the intention, right? If you don't start with setting the intention, it's very hard to engineer, or as you pointed out, reverse engineer and then re-engineer to get to the action. So will you talk a little bit about the role of intention in managing it?
It's, another phrase that's maybe overused sometimes, but I call it the valuation of a task, and it can be working in alignment with one's values. How do you want to be? Why do you want to do this thing? Why do you want to get taxes out of the way? Nobody wants to do it. I was an okay student in my life. I don't think I was ever really in the mood to do homework. But how do we get ourselves at least engaged in these things? And the other side of it, and in alignment with our values, and this is a consistent finding across humans, we like doing stuff. We like getting things done, but that's part of that working memory of being able to hold the end in mind as we're getting started. So we really emphasize a lot on getting engaged, getting through to that period where we're actually doing it, and hopefully having some affirming experiences like, okay, this is hard, but I'm making progress. I can see it, or I can see my child responding to something that I try to do it. Maybe not perfectly. And that can be how perfectionism comes in at times, but I can see it making a difference, or I can catch myself I'm being a little more patient right now. And that's a good thing. Or, a partner, a co-parent supporting you, say, you handled that well, even if it didn't work out well. And we get some positive reinforcement aligned with what we're intending to do, and some partial success is success.
Yeah. Well, and what you're describing is that there's at least two parts of this. So one is the understanding why you want to, and kind of connecting back into the values and the the motivation is the language we might use, right? Yeah. And then the other piece of it is saying that's not enough, right? It's just sort of, you also have to, it's more than just wanting to do something that gets you to be able to do it. There's another piece of it, which is the behavior change, is what I'm inferring. Is that right?
Yeah. And what I'll talk about is the engagement, like even just that, I call it the UG feeling. And I got that from a client because he was saying, yeah, I know I can do the homework. I know I can do the assignment. I'm smart enough, but I don't feel like doing it.
Right.
And the UG is what gets in the way. And it is sort of like exposure for anxiety. And we're not talking like, I have to work on this for an hour before I get relief. It's usually a couple minutes. Mm-hmm. Once you're, it's almost like Tom Hanks paddling off the island. Once he's over the big waves and he's out. Now, granted, he probably had like 8-degree sunburn or whatever he had by the time he got picked up by the boat. But it's sort of like getting over that wave and then you're paddling. And now you're engaged in doing whatever you set out to do. And that's, you have some positive feelings associated with that. I'm not saying it's euphoria, but it's like, almost resignation is motivation. Oh, all right, I might as well finish the homework assignment. And then we get to the positive feeling on the other side.
Yeah. Well, what really jumps at me about what you're saying, there are a lot of things, but there's this notion of effort, energy. And, one of the things we've learned about executive function is one of the areas of executive function that's impacted, that's challenged, is effort management or energy management. And so that UG factor, that engagement is part of what's needed to muster the energy or to be willing to put the effort in, because sometimes it's the anticipation of effort that shuts us down before we ever actually start paddling past that wave.
Oh, yeah. We think ourselves out of it. The emotions go up, even with things like choice fatigue. And that's one of the things with
favorite topic.
One of the things with planning or the fancy phrase is pre-commitment. You're spending less energy deciding what to do. Not that every day has to be planned down to the minute and all for spontaneity. But if you already decide, okay, this is when I'm working on taxes, I'll do it for at least 30 minutes. That reduced cognitive load. The brain is about like 3 to 5% of our body's mass and uses about 20% of the calories. Okay. And there's actually, I ran across some interesting work where even sitting quietly, our brain is burning like 15 calories. If we're paying attention to a lecture or something we have to learn, the brain itself is burning like 65 calories in an hour, and reading is somewhere in between. So if we say it makes me tired just thinking about it, yeah, gosh,
it does.
It does. And switching between tasks or doing other things and then going, oh, I know I have this thing to do later. It's sort of like we're running laps in our head. We're burning calories, even though it's not directly associated with getting the task done. And there is like probably about 45 to 50 minutes getting engaged into a task where we go, it's sort of like a good analogy is like a nonstop flight. Rather than having 3 stops or up and down, up and down, up and down. If you can launch and do a nonstop flight, that's a lot more efficient. You get there quicker. I'm not telling, this is not a knowledge problem. It's a performance problem, but all these things that can be used in different assortments to get engaged in whatever we want to get engaged in. And also having breaks, downtime, relationship time, just like with parenting, have positive time with your children where you're not worried about reward schedules or things like that. You're just hanging out, doing stuff, and we enjoy it more. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, but but
sometimes a new lens for listening to it can be really powerful.
Sure. Yeah. And that's part of the reframing. And sometimes the novelty.
The question that I think a lot of parents may be asking is, it sounds like this requires a certain level of maturity and intrinsic motivation and self-awareness. And how do we begin to teach this sort of stuff to our kids who may not be, oh, I get the fact that I've got that UG feeling and I don't want to start something, but I'm going to try to figure out how to get over the UG?
2 thoughts that come to mind is one, modeling aloud what you're doing, and even calling things like the UG feeling. And that was just like what resonated for me with that one client and it seemed to stick. But people, you could come up with your own word, your child could come up with their word. And labeling emotions too has been found to reduce amygdala firing and is another way to use the language system to change our relationship with the feelings, not turn them off, obviously, but having that container, even if it's not precise or it's idiosyncratic, or a child has their own way to describe their anxiety or their frustration with math homework or whatever it may be, having that container to put it in helps at least turn the dial down a little bit to hopefully stay engaged. And these are, so the parents can model it and talk about their own UGG feelings, and maybe having the child, hey, do you want to help me get started in unloading the dishwasher? I'll help you get started on math homework. Maybe we can do the first problem together, and just different ways to shape it, not all or nothing, but being present. And I think it also helps the parents. One, there's some research on what's called distanced self-talk, talking to ourselves aloud by name or as you, the same way we would for somebody else, has been found, not specific to ADHD, but been found to be helpful for emotional management and also for task initiation. You know what? You just need to take those envelopes that say important tax document enclosed to the dining room table and just to open them. Just organize them. You're not doing anything really productive yet, but you've just exponentially increased the likelihood, or sitting with your child doing the first math problem. Yeah, you just off to a good start.
I was doing another podcast episode and with somebody who talked about one of the things she had learned from us and later in coaching was reframing, and then we started talking about rephrasing. And what you just spoke to, I think, is the combination of the two. It's reframing how we think about it, rephrasing how we language it, to invite ourselves, compel ourselves to perform differently based on how we think and talk to ourselves.
And for the neurotypical parents out there, it's also about not dismissing it. It's not about saying, oh, this isn't so hard. You can just do it, get it done. Recognizing that if it was that easy, they would do it.
Nobody wants to sit doing 3 hours of math homework a night. It can be hard. And being able to translate it into, okay, this may not be hard for me, or I don't get it, but I can see, and let's try to do something else, or just even asking and inviting. And even, I'm not expecting necessarily an answer, but saying, hey, we'll figure it out, reinforcing the process, and hey, we'll work on this together. We'll figure it out. We'll talk with your teacher, whatever the case may be.
Well, so you just hit the word process, which was the other question earlier I wanted to bring up, which is one of the things Diane and I've spent a lot of time the last decade or so trying to figure out what is it about the coach approach. And I know you've done a lot of research with David Work about CBT and coaching and where they come together and where they depart. And what we've landed on, for lack of better terms, so I'm looking to you for insight, is that coaching tends to be a very process-oriented approach. So we're looking at the process that people go through to get something done instead of only holding them accountable to the outcome. Can you speak to that and where CBT comes into that?
You know what? I would say that that's probably been a necessary, or at least I found it to be, at least in our shop, a necessary approach, an adaptation for adults with ADHD. I know with Dr. Beck, he was very much into Socratic questioning, trying, helping people, and just through discussions, trying to help people, discover and rediscover their strengths or whatever the case may be. And, that would help, like, especially in the early days, counter some of the pessimistic thoughts with depression. It got mislabeled as, power of positive thinking, even though maybe with depressed people, that was a little more part of it. But bringing it back to, CBT for adult ADHD and coaching, I'd say that it is more about the process, because, that line, it's not a knowledge problem. Telling somebody to start earlier or throwing a planner at them. Yeah, planner's a great tool, but I'm not the handiest guy. You could hand me, and I still have to look up which one's the Phillips head. I guess it's the pointy one, the Phillips head screwdriver versus the flathead one. You could give me a whole toolbox, and I
still don't know how to use the tools.
If anything, I tell my wife, dial 911 just in case, if you ever see me doing stuff around the house. So it's more about the process, even something like a planner where somebody goes, I know the theory behind it, but sitting with them saying, what do you want to do at 9 o'clock? How long? 3 hours? You don't do the stuff you like for 3 hours. So let's schedule it for 45 minutes. How long does it take you to walk across campus or drive across town? And I've had people go, I've never done it this way, but now I see. And this is, and like I tell people, I might have a recipe for how I present it, but it is like a cooking recipe where you're going to have your own spices and flavors and things. Like you go, okay, I see the gist of it, but here's what works for me, color coding or some other way to use the tool. But that's the ideal of finding what works for you, being able to personalize it and make it work the best way it can for you.
Great. So we need to take a quick break, and then I want to come back and I want to ask you about procrastivity.
Will do.
Hi, it's Elaine. And if you like this podcast, you'll love our coach approach. Whether you're a parent looking for support or a professional supporting families, we invite you to download a free guide with 12 key coaching tools at impactparents.com/gift. You can begin using a coach approach to help kids become more independent or improve all of your conversations at work and at home. That's impactparents.com/gift. So the term I heard referenced about and by you was procrastivity. And I was joking when we first started today. I had a little slip of paper on my desk for months because I knew we had this scheduled, and I wanted to ask you about procrastivity. So will you talk about it a little bit? What does that mean?
That's another diamond I got from a client. I was talking with him. It was somebody who we had the plan for him to work on a report for work. I think we had a Friday meeting. It was due on Monday, and we had this great plan for how he's going to work on it. Came back Monday, Tuesday, whenever we met, said, yeah, I did all these chores around the house, ran all these errands, all these fix-it things, and I still left the report till 10 o'clock at night and pulled the all-nighter. And I was pointing that out to him, you were actually really productive, but you did all these things other than the report. And he said, yeah, we call that procrastivity. Now, I did not invent the term. I looked it up on Urban Dictionary, a very reputable source.
Right.
But as far as I can tell, it's been around since 2010, according to Urban Dictionary. But what it is, it's avoiding a higher priority, more time-sensitive task by doing other things that are productive. It's also known as productive procrastination. And in the grand scheme of things, it is a way to salvage a day. Well, I'm not going to do taxes today, so let me I'm going to mow the yard. I'm going to do these other things. It is a way to get the most out of it. But with folks with ADHD, like that young man with the deadline, but what I really took away from it got me thinking, well, what is it about, like for him, the errands, if let's just say he mowed the lawn or something like that, what is it about those tasks that faced with a report or homework that all of a sudden some other tasks we might have been procrastinating on, what is it about those tasks that all of a sudden seem more doable and actionable than the report? Mm-hmm. And are there ways we can repurpose those skills for the priority tasks? And some of the things that emerge from that reverse engineering is the escape or procrastivity tasks tend to be more hands-on or manual. Mm-hmm. So errands, stuff around the house, or even within academics, there's probably like a rock, paper, scissors algorithm, like reading is easier than writing and a problem set is easier than reading. They tend to be a clearer way to get started where somebody already has a script. All right, mm-hmm. Unloading the dishwasher, easy. Mowing your yard, easy. Taxes, writing an essay, tougher, more uncertain.
Well, it's clear what needs to be done is what I'm
clear sense of starting and making progress and sustaining progress. Mm-hmm. And usually, not always, but usually a clear and definitive endpoint within the same day. The lawn is done, the dishwasher is empty, things like that, as opposed to a paper or report where we might go, okay, I worked on it for 2 hours. I'm still not sure how close I am to getting it done. But I think there was a lot of things there that have repurposed in terms of, I actually have a worksheet. It's clumsy title, but I insisted on the title, the How You Don't Do Things form. That's in the Rethinking Adult ADHD book that came from this. And there's a chapter on procrastivity and everything I just summarized here.
Well, but going back to what you were saying earlier is, finishing stuff, getting stuff done is part of what helps the brain to motivate to do something else. We always say, the solutions are in the success, or success breeds success, right? And so that's what you're describing. Doing all the chores in the house, if it doesn't exhaust you, might give you the energy lift you need to go, okay, now I can do my taxes.
Well, I think I also read once that it also gets your brain in gear, doesn't it?
But you know what? And I'm for whatever works.
Right.
That's the case. But a lot of people will say, yeah, I'll do the lawn, then I'll be in the mood to do taxes. But a lot of times,
they never do it.
Because the mental is physical. So the mental is tiring, but this is not empirical, but I would say it's probably easier going from something like taxes, then you're done and you go, okay, I might not be ready to file, but I worked on it for an hour. I feel good. I did something. Now it's probably easier to go mow the lawn, something that's less cognitive load than it is going from the lawn or something physical and then going to something mental. because it just takes, usually the mental stuff is a little more threatening to our financial sense, like maybe with taxes or things like writing or an assignment with school where there are grades. The lawn is sort of pass fail. Did I do it or not?
Right.
Grade.
Shows
and
my
even
sock
if
drawer.
Yeah. And if even if I hand in the paper, am I going to get a passing grade? And this might be drawn on somebody's past experiences. So if somebody might have a couple things at the office that they do. Let me do this, check a couple emails, check on reports, call a couple people. Okay, I'm warmed up. Let me work on the monthly report. So it's really the personalized, but
very independent.
Figure out what works.
That's distracted like the young man, and he waited until Sunday night to do the report. Yes, he was really productive, but it was more like he was pushing himself away from actually doing the task and justifying not doing it and justifying the delay once we got in there and looked at it. And a lot of it's very gut level emotions too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to start wrapping this conversation up. Hard to believe. Mm-hmm. Let's turn for a moment. How can people find out more about you? I know you mentioned the book. The title of the book is?
Oh, the most recent one was Rethinking Adult ADHD, and it's really a focus on the role of cognitions in adults with ADHD. The one I'm working on now is an adult ADHD and anxiety workbook.
Great.
So that should
will put
early 2024.
We'll put as we have them, we'll put them in the links, and definitely it's always on our reading carousel, everybody.
And getting in touch with me, I have a website, www.CBT4ADHD.com. And the links to the books are on there, and just other information about stuff I have going on, media links. I'll probably link this one with your permission when it comes up. And
absolutely.
And just to be clear, it's CBT as in therapy, because sometimes people think I say CBD and they get really excited. But
then a whole different kind of therapy.
Really disappointed when I explain.
Although that's another podcast episode. Maybe we should do that one.
That's for somebody else.
Yeah, we'll have it in the show notes, everyone, but CBT4ADHD.com. And you've got a transition coming up in your life from when we're recording this.
Right. I'm going to be leaving the University of Pennsylvania at the end of June, leaving on good terms, no ill will, just ready for a new challenge. And I'm just going to be starting my own solo, independent, total telepsychology practice.
Telepsychology. And so you'll be
just totally virtual.
But still in Pennsylvania?
Well, I'm licensed in Pennsylvania, but I also have for psychologists what's called the PsyPact credential. Yep. It is a consortium of states where if you're licensed in your home state and you have this credential, you can treat people remotely living in other states. So it's about 33 states now and the District of Columbia, and even one of the U.S. territories are participating. Beautiful. So I also can reach people outside PA. With that was also an appeal of going solo.
Beautiful. Congratulations on the work that you've done. The contributions you've made to this field over your career to date. And I'm excited to see where you go from here, because those of us who started late life careers, you know that you're starting something new as a sort of an entrepreneur. It's going to have a different tone to it. So I'm excited to see where you go.
I'm curious to see where it ends up to.
Yeah, I get it. So to those of you listening, wait, one more thing. We want to wrap with, before we close with them, anything else you want to share with our listeners today that you feel like we didn't talk about, or you want to reemphasize, any sort of closing insights that you want to share?
You know what? Just pulling one out of the air. It's a little play on words that I sort of like, and I think it's apropos for people helping adults with ADHD or anybody with ADHD, but my specialty. Rehabilitation is a field that looks at getting somebody back to a previous level of functioning, like physical rehab, stuff like that. Habilitation with an H is helping people make the most of what they have already. Maybe they're underutilizing it. And I say at its best, probably CBT, coaching, other supports are habilitation, like looking at all the goals, things that might have been put to the side or assumed like, oh, maybe I can't do that, but really looking at unleashing potential and at least giving things a try, even if they don't work out. It would be, hey, I gave it a try and I know for sure, but a whole lot more will work out. So, there's a lot of different ways to pursue change and progress.
Well, and what I've liked the most about your conversation is that there's two parts of this. There's the mindset management and the executive function management. And we don't always think about the two of those together. And it's a valuable conversation.
Right. Well, you know what? Part of the, I think you guys talked about quotes, and I'm going to butcher this one because I don't have it in front of me, but it was like, and there's another one I was going to use, but it's when you press the pause button on a machine, it stops. But when you push the pause button on humans, they start. Because you can reimagine what you're doing, work in alignment with your values. You get to reset and reapproach things. So I always like that quote.
I love that. That's great. Okay. So, but now what was the quote you wanted that you were originally planning to share?
It was Charles Darwin. I just ran across one of my pandemic reads. I got to read Janet Brown's 2-volume biography of Charles Darwin. And somewhere along the lines, he said, "The mind is a chaos of delight." And I just think that was a great line.
Oh, is that for my family?
Well, you know what? The longer quote, I had to write it down. The mind is a chaos of delight out of which a world of future and more quiet pleasure will arise. So
I love that.
That's really cool.
On so many levels. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. Awesome. All right, Diane, we ready to wrap this up?
Yeah, I think so. Dr. Ramsay, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been just a great conversation, and I know our parents took a lot away from it, both for themselves as well as potentially for their kids.
Well, you're very kind, and you guys are doing great work and are a great support. And it was nice to be able to spend some time with both of you.
Yeah, thank you. We enjoyed it. To those of you listening, we want to check in. What is your takeaway from this episode? What's the insight that you're gleaning from the conversation you've been listening to? You know, with coaching, we always want to help you take what you've gotten and apply it in your life. So take a moment to ask yourself, what's your insight? And how do you want to take it forward with you into your week this week? What's next for you, and how does this apply? And as always, thanks for all that you're doing for yourself and for your kids. At the end of the day, it makes a huge difference. Take care, everyone.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast.
Behavior therapy training for parents is actually recommended as a first-line treatment for complex kids. For information about Sanity School, our training program for parents or teachers, which has helped thousands of families around the globe, visit impactparents.com/sanityschool.